D-Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you. And if you're tuning in looking for Chase and Big Joe and you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, you're not Chase McCabe. Wait a minute.
What time is it?
You're not Big Joe Dubin. Don't worry. It is indeed 9 o'clock, but we are shuffling the lineup a little bit this week. Jared is on vacation until Friday, so we're taking this opportunity to switch things up. So Willie and I will be with you today and tomorrow from 9 to noon. Chase and Big Joe will be on from noon to 3. But we're happy to be here a little bit earlier today. Hello, Willie. How are you?
I am doing well. It's been a heck of a time up here in New England. We've been shuttling back and forth between Narragansett, Rhode Island, where my in-laws in, Aaron's parents, and Boston, in Northeastern University. They had the walk for her college for graduation, my daughter Evans. That was Wednesday night at Matthews Arena. We talked about the nostalgia of that building, opened in 1910. The Celtics played there. It was built before the old Boston Garden. So that's how old that place is. And then another old place, Fenway Park, was the spectacle yesterday. A beautiful New England postcard day, packed house at Fenway. I mean, full for the graduation celebration. So we've had just a great time. So flying back this afternoon, back with you guys tomorrow in the studio. And yeah, we've had to adjust the time here. We had to get the blood flowing early today.
Yes. And trust me, I will get to Jared later because
that'll get your blood flowing.
The rod up Jared's butt must have a rod up its butt, which is something that we could say every day. But we'll explain, because there was one thing that he tweeted while on vacation that, man, oh man, it was an all-timer. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But Willie, our resident Commodore, I'm sure you are feeling wonderful today, not just because your baby girl graduated from college, but the Commodores took 2 out of 3 in Knoxville against the Volunteers. Vanderbilt wins the series against Tennessee for the first time since 2021. Tennessee took the first game on Friday 3-2, but Vanderbilt wins Saturday 10-6 and Sunday 7-5. So I'm sure you're feeling even better than you already were with Vanderbilt going to Knoxville and taking 2 out of 3 from the Vols.
Well, before I get to that series, let me just give a quick shout out to my other child, Mahoney Donick. Speaking of college baseball, the Denison Big Red took care of business in the NCAC tournament. And so they are league champions. They're going to be a national seed, which is what the Commodores are trying to do now, especially after that victory in Knoxville. So the brackets, Adam, it's bracket day for Division III. That will come out at 11 a.m. Central Time. So the Big Red will find out who they are playing in the regionals there. So that's another reason I'm feeling good about the baseball world. But let's get to Vanderbilt, because, Adam, I believe I got this right. I think Tennessee at one point recently had beaten Vanderbilt something like 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 consecutive times. And it was really sticking in the craw of Vanderbilt fans, maybe more so than anything else, with the relative dip since Vanderbilt won the championship, the national championship in 2019. Then 2020, we know, was wiped out. Basically, the whole college season never really got started. They played 5 or 6 games. Then in 2021, with Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker, they got within 1 game of winning it again. And since then, there's been a relative dip in Vanderbilt baseball. But that's one thing. The other part of the equation that was really, and this is sad to say, because Vanderbilt fans usually like being the underdog. They like picking teams off. They've been appreciative of how great Vanderbilt baseball has been, but they started to get underwhelmed. And there was started to be, hey, as the game passed by Tim Corbin, does he need to evolve? Does he need to change? Or does he need to get out? Does he want to do this with the NIL and all this? While Tennessee was speed rushing into the new college sports, NIL, changing your team around, throwing big money to grab other players even within the league. And so Vanderbilt's win, I think, had a lot of layers to it yesterday to take 2 out of 3 from Tennessee. It was a spicy, spicy weekend, to say the least. I think we knew it would be. And even after the final pitch was thrown, there was a lot of emotion and a lot of jawing back and forth between the two teams, because Tennessee, Adam, I would say, is the Cobra Kai of college baseball, maybe of college sports. Right? Have you seen the miniseries Cobra Kai? Have you seen?
I have not actually watched the miniseries. I have seen the Karate Kid. I have not watched.
Okay, so you're familiar with the concept of Cobra Kai, right?
Yes.
It's ruled by intimidation. It's, I guess the line from the Karate Kid is mercy is for the weak, right? Talk trash, back it up, be brash, and that's really what it's all about. So how do you deal with that? We talked about that with Mitch Light a lot. I think everybody in the league has had to try to decide, what do we do about this, right? Because the first instinct everybody has is to start a fight or retaliate. But that's maybe not the best way to go about it. As Tim Corbin's line that Mitch Light cited on Friday when we had him on was, you can't play angry. If you play angry, you're not going to play well. So you have to be able to keep your even keel to be able to play your best. So I think Vanderbilt did a pretty good job of that during the show over the weekend, because in Knoxville, the fans get into it. They're going to be a part of it. They rile up the players rile up the fans, and you have to be able to hang in there and not back down, but stay focused. And even after Tennessee won the first game, Vanderbilt did a good job of staying even-keeled and winning the last 2 games. It was a great series. All 3 games were tight.
To your point about the spiciness of Game 3 particularly, you mentioned the benches clearing after the final out. But even back in the first inning, UT's Andrew Fisher hits a home run and proceeded to talk trash to every single player on the Commodores infield as he rounded the bases, and made sure to talk to the dugout as well as he rounded third. So you knew right from the start of the game, Willie, it was going to be tense, to say the least.
And that kid is a heck of a player. He leads the SEC in home runs, which is not easy to do. But he hit a tape measure shot, and he decided to set the tone. He got the crowd riled up, and you're right. He stared down the pitcher. He flipped the bat, and he yelled at every Vanderbilt player. He made eye contact and said something to every Vanderbilt defender around the infield. And then when you round third, you round the visitors' dugout. So the visitors' dugout by that time had noticed this, and they were yelling at him back. And so much so that the catcher, Colin Barzy, ran out into the middle of the field to try to stare back at him and say something back to him. So I haven't seen that very often, but that's one of the few times Vanderbilt reacted to the brashness of Tennessee. But that sort of set the tone. That tied the score at 1 in the first inning. And Barzy, the catcher, then retaliated by hitting 2 home runs in the game. The catcher that got so bothered by Fisher's excitement. So maybe he needs to react like that a little bit more. Maybe he was playing angry and it worked. But it was spicy from inning 1 to inning 9 yesterday for sure.
I think the old proverb is, he who laughs last laughs loudest. So perhaps that's what the Commodores were doing yesterday. They did get the final word by winning the game and winning the series. Again, Vanderbilt winning a series against Tennessee for the first time since 2021. On the flip side, Willie, Tennessee is reeling. It has lost 4 consecutive series and 5 of its past 6. So where are the Volunteers now after yet another series loss?
I'm looking at D1Baseball.com, and they've got their latest RPI rankings out, and they usually have a very good pulse. D1Baseball.com, I think, of postseason projections. Vanderbilt, with the winning a series against a really good team on the road, does more for you than just about anything. And Vanderbilt's RPI now is up to 3. By the way, Georgia is number 1, Auburn number 2 in the RPI. Texas has slipped down to 4. Auburn has moved up. Auburn's having a heck of a year. But Vanderbilt is now 3 in the RPI and 2 in the strength of schedule. So they put themselves in a really good position to not only be hosting the first regional, which is the field of 64. There are 16 4-team regionals. And then if you are a national seed, a top 8 national seed, you would then, if you win the regional, guarantee that you have home field advantage for the super regional, the best 2 out of 3. So Vanderbilt's in a great position now to be one of those top 8 national seeds. Tennessee, you would have said, would have been a shoe-in for that as the defending national championship. But as you mentioned, though, Adam, they've slipped some, and they're now 15th in the rankings in the RPI, and their strength of schedule is 36. And Mitch mentioned one of the nuances that if you pay close attention, there are 2 teams in the SEC that have really struggled. They might be the only 2 teams that missed the tournament altogether. Missouri, who's historically bad, even though they swept Texas A&M over the weekend. Congratulations to Missouri. They finally found ways to win conference games. But Missouri and South Carolina are the 2 weakest teams. 6 of Tennessee's wins are against those 2 teams. So that has hurt their strength of schedule and their RPI. So there's pressure on Tennessee against Arkansas, who's number 5 right now. By the way, the SEC has 7 of the top 8 teams in the RPI. That's how good the league is. But Tennessee plays Arkansas next weekend, and a lot of people think they're going to need to do well in that series in order to be hosting the first round, the first regional. And they have now probably moved out of the picture to be a national seed.
By the way, Chase McCabe tells me that Tim Corbin will be joining Chase and Big Joe at 2 o'clock today. So you can
like to hear that. Good.
Tim Corbin on with Chase and Big Joe at 2 o'clock today. By the way,
yes,
again,
I'm very curious to hear how he handles the questions about the rivalry and the heatedness, because you can't have 2 more different coaches than Tim Corbin and Tony Vitello. And I would say Tony Vitello, and I don't know if he would embrace this or not, but I think he's the John Kreese of college baseball. He is the head of Cobra Kai. He is always jawing at the referees, at the umpires. He's not afraid to pop out of the dugout, get emotional, get thrown out if that's what needs to happen. He's right alongside of his players as they do the brash stuff. So they've leaned into it over the years. It's worked for them. But when you slip a little bit, you definitely become the target. And Jackie Bradley Jr., who played at South Carolina, played a long time for the Red Sox and a number of teams. He was sort of the new guy on the scene. He was in the booth for all 3 games with Tom Hart and now I'm blanking on his name, Kyle Peterson. What's the other analyst that was there who always does the big games for college baseball? They were talking about that dynamic. And when you win, everything's great. But you become a target. Everybody wants to beat you so bad that sometimes it brings out the best in your opponents.
So Tim Corbin will join Chase and Big Joe at 2 o'clock. Again, Willie and I will be on from 9 to noon today and tomorrow. Chase and Big Joe from 12 to 3. Jake Lyman and Derek Mason from 3 to 6. And before I want to do a wellness check. I think we need to conduct a wellness check on the San Francisco 49ers, because on Friday, Adam Schefter, among others, reported that the San Francisco 49ers, not only did they sign Andre Dillard, they also signed Nicholas Petit-Frere. And I sent that text to our group, you, me, Derek, and David. And this was Willie's actual response. Quote, "Is that a fake account?" End quote. Because we were all flabbergasted that the San Francisco 49ers decided, let's sign 2 of the worst offensive tackles in recent memory at the same time. So I don't know what's going on in San Francisco. I don't pretend to know what their offensive line looks like. But man, oh man, that tweet got a lot of reaction on Friday afternoon, Willie.
You know, it is a classic example of, and I agree, that is one that was just teed up or tossed in. In baseball, if you're doing a little batting practice, we call it soft toss, right? You warm up, you just underhand flip behind a screen, you put it right in the wheelhouse, and just let the guy take a couple of hacks, to get warmed up, pitches right down the middle. Was that not served up perfectly for the Tennessee fans to see that? and say, what in the world could they be thinking? But it does show you that it's hard to find depth at offensive line. And so, as poorly as those guys played for the Titans, and don't get me wrong, they played poorly. Everybody's looking for help on the offensive line, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure. And I don't know if those guys are projected to start or anything like that. God forbid if you're a 49ers fan and those guys are penciled in as starters. But those guys are good enough to play in the NFL. And as poorly as they played, somebody gives them another chance. Like, it's like being a left-hand reliever in Major League Baseball. You just got to keep throwing. Somebody will sign you.
Let's look at some of these numbers from Warren Sharp on Andre Dillard and Nicholas Petit-Frere. According to Warren Sharp, Andre Dillard didn't earn any playing time in 2024 with Green Bay. The last time he played meaningful snaps was in 2023, and he allowed 12 sacks, which ranked 136 out of 137, 9 hits, which ranked 131 of 137, and 41 pressures, 119 of 137. He graded out 107th out of 137 tackles. But that's not all. Nicholas Petit-Frere played in 15 games last year and allowed 10 sacks, 138 out of 140, 5 hits, 109 out of 140 tackles, 41 pressures, 131st out of 140, while racking up 10 penalties, 121 of 140. He graded out 122 of 140 tackles.
Right. So this would be the point I would throw out there. In their defense, if you want to call it a defense, you have to be good enough to be given that opportunity to be that bad. It's like a pitcher who is in the starting rotation. Let's pick your worst team, the Colorado Rockies right now, who might be challenging the White Sox for the worst team of all time right now, although congratulations to them. They did win yesterday. So if you're a Rockies fan, Kara Hammer, if you're listening, thumbs up.
They
Rockies
did win
won
the day after
game.
losing 21-0.
That's right. And I think if you look at their last 3 or 4 games, it was something like 41-5 that they had lost. It's like a little league team that, just has no players. But if you're good enough to go out there in the rotation and make 30 starts, and your record is something like 5-20, and you have a 5.8 ERA, the numbers look awful. But they thought you were good enough to deserve an opportunity over other guys who maybe the numbers don't look so bad, but they didn't even give those guys a chance. So Petit-Frere and Dillard at least earned the opportunity to go out there and be bad. That's worth something. And that's what I think the 49ers are thinking. Like, it's either this or pick up a couple of guys off the street who have never played in an NFL game. That's what you're looking at sometimes when you're trying to piece together depth on the offensive line.
I appreciate your glass half full optimism.
It's not half full. It's just what it is. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
I would love to go out and go, 3-15 for a bad baseball team, as opposed to not playing at all.
I suppose that's true. Well, good luck to the San Francisco 49ers with Andre
I'd
Dillard.
I'd still get booed off the field like those guys did, but at least you're out there. You got a chance.
Good luck to the 49ers. Good luck to Brock Purdy. Specifically, boy, you're going to need it if Nicholas Petit-Frere and Andre Dillard are playing meaningful snaps for the San
Do we know if
Francisco...
their projected starters have a chance to, is there a job that's open there? I don't know their depth chart.
I don't know their depth chart, but Justin in Greenbrier on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com says, what's going to cheese me off is if those guys go out there and play well.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing is it's funny now, but if they put together a season and play well, remember Nicholas Petit-Frere is still pretty young. I don't know about Dillard is the one that I just don't think. I think we know enough that he's just
Andre
not
Dillard is 29 years old, so he is what
he's
he
a little
is at
older.
this point.
And also,
Petit-Frere is 25.
The more we watched, and Petit-Frere was awful. Look, I'm not trying to say he was great, but we have found out over the last 2 years when a quarterback holds the ball, like Tannehill and Will Levis were known to do, it does make it a lot tougher on the offensive line. So some of it was the environment. Whereas the 49ers with Purdy, I do think that they get rid of the ball quicker. They probably look at those numbers and say, okay, we can at least get by because we get rid of the ball quicker. We run the ball better. Now, this is the version of the 49ers that was really good, the 49ers have got some question marks, right? With all the injuries they've had and what they've had to do since they looked like they were the best team in football. There's a lot more question marks now, which is why they signed those guys. They just added 2 more question marks.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Your thoughts on Vanderbilt's win at Tennessee. Andre Dillard and Nicholas Petit-Frere headed to the Bay Area with the San Francisco 49ers. Again, good luck to the 49ers in Brock Purdy with that. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, a spirited debate, as always, on Jared versus Joe last week. David Reed asked a question of Jared and Joe about the Predators, which led to a really interesting conversation that I think Willie and I would love to get involved in. And we will do that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Let me tell all of you out there that Nashville's best deal of the week is Bavarian Beer House, conveniently located at Opry Mills Mall. Enjoy beer, food, music, and fun at Nashville's only authentic German beer hall, where it's Oktoberfest every day. Head to thegamenashville.com/deals now to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last.
I mean, I still think that Trotz has to be judged by all these young prospects with which they've acquired since they brought him into the fold, whether it's Wood or Mullendijk or Schaefer or Edstrom or Surin, Stiga, whoever they pick fifth, the other two draft choices they use. And it takes you about 4 years before you know whether or not somebody can play. Now, I'm a little nervous because we knew Philip Forsberg at 20 years old could play. And outside of Mullendijk, we don't know if any of these guys can play. So that is concerning. But I do think that everybody's going to want to see them win at the NHL level next year to justify whether or not Trotz is doing a good job. So I'm going to say they have to get to the 85-point mark, which is you're competing for a playoff spot there with the 85 points, maybe higher, maybe 90. But again, I think that the real judge of whether or not Trotz can do this is if all these prospects that the prospect gurus say are third pair defensemen, third or fourth line guys, Trotz says they're first pair defensemen like Andrew Gibson or first line centers like David Edstrom. If those guys are legit, then I think, which is what Trotz says, then I think he's doing a good job. If they're Scarbinis, then I think Trotz is doing a bad job. And that really has nothing to do with the point total next year, but I'll go with 85 to 90.
That is utterly absurd. Are you kidding me?
That was only part of Joe Rexrode's response to Jared. He got even a little more heated up after that, if you can imagine. But that was Jared versus Joe last week. David Reed asked about the Nashville Predators, and Jared and Joe took it into an argument about how Barry Trotz should be judged. Adam Vingan, Willie Donick, David James here. By the way, Nate on our text line, Willie says, I hate this. Well, that was another text he said. He said, DVD needs to be rebranded this week as VW, Vingan and Willie. Well, Nate, the beauty of our program is we do have an extra D, David James. So as long as I'm here, it's always DVD. That's what I'm saying. It's Donick, Vingan, and David today.
You put the V in the DVD.
Yes. Now, when I'm not here and it's David, Willie, and Derek, it's Triple D, which is a whole nother discussion to have.
Yes.
But as long as I'm here, if Derek or Willie is not here, it's always DVD. So rest assured, Nate, it's always DVD no matter what. And Derek Mason will be on with Jake Lyman today from 3 to 6. But I thought that conversation between Jared and Joe last week was interesting because I do think that there are Predators fans, Willie, who side with Joe Rexrode that after such a horrible season that Barry Trotz should be judged by what happens this offseason to help the current team, and that next season the Predators need to be firmly in the mix like we all expected them to be this past season. Jared, on the other hand, believes that Barry Trotz should be judged by whether the top prospects in the organization turn into franchise players, or at least players that can represent, in part, the next generation of the Nashville Predators. He said by 2028, Jared said, by 2028, we'll know if these guys, meaning the top prospects, are good or not. And he is willing to give Barry Trotz that much runway before he decides whether Trotz is cut out for the job. So I'm curious for where you stand on this question, Willie. Should Barry Trotz be judged by what happens next season, or must we wait until the prospects develop?
Well, let me congratulate Joe and Jared, because I think that was a good debate. I actually,
you were skeptical. Let's be honest.
I was skeptical because I think sometimes they go off the rails on that thing and they just start yelling at each other. But I think both were trying to make some good points, and they just laid out what we've talked about a lot with Barry Trotz. This is the challenge that Barry Trotz is trying to do. He's trying to thread the needle between the two sides of the argument. He's trying to thread the needle on Joe's side that, hey, I signed some veteran guys. I've got the 30-something crew. Shout out to the TV show 30-something that I never watched as a teenager, but that was a big nighttime weekly drama.
I'm familiar with
on
this
ABC.
program.
I never watched it, but you'll recognize some of the actors in there. It was but the 30-somethings who have only a short shelf life back left, right? Yossi. Sorry. Well, I mean, let's go down the list. Yossi, Forsberg, Stamkos, Marchessault, that group, right? We know they've only got a certain amount of really high-end parts of their careers left. You want to win while those guys are still in that window. That's one part of the needle you got to thread. The other part is bringing along, which takes a long time, Jared's piece of this equation, all of the draft capital, all of the restocking of the farm system that they've been working on now for the last couple of years since Barry Trotz took over. That's a tough needle to thread to win in the meantime. And so I thought when Jared said 85 points, that's kind of the worst case scenario because you've missed the needle, right? And you end up with a mid-level first-round pick.
By the way, if they had 85
it's
points
hard to
this
find an
season,
impact player there.
If the Predators had 85 points this season, they would have still missed the playoffs by 11 points.
Right. You've got to get 95 to 97 to be in the conversation. So they've got to be close to 30 points better than they were this year to get back into the playoff picture. And you've got to do that with the idea that, you know, you're not just trying to sneak into the playoffs. You want to get into the playoffs with a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. So that is, it's a tough nut to crack. There's no question about it. I'm a little bit more with Jared. I think long term, the defining part, I think short of, you know, a stunning Stanley Cup run out of nowhere, which could happen. But I think long term, it's much more about the farm system developing because so much is riding on. And I think Jared made a good nuance point. We talked to Scott Wheeler last week, right? Defining the top 10 farm system of the Predators right now. They're in the top 10, but it's more of a volume top 10. And they don't have that high-end franchise changing player that can make a huge impact just on his own. If the impact is what they hope it will probably be a number of players chipping in on a winning team. And when you do that, you have a lot of young players doing that. They generally don't take up a lot of cap space. So you have the cap space in theory to go get what you need and fill holes elsewhere. So we're trying to have a nuanced discussion. I'm curious where you stand on that, Adam.
I honestly, first of all, kudos to Jared Stillman for practicing patience. I didn't know that was a thing that could happen.
Right. He's the guy. He and Joe agree on this, that it doesn't matter that the Admirals make a playoff run or not. They had a huge soapbox last year. These games don't mean anything. And last night, Fedor Svechkov, who was a critical part of how fast Nashville can get impact from the young players. He played quite a bit of time in the NHL. He scored 2 goals, including the series overtime game winner to dig them out of a 0-2 hole in the best of 5. So, you know, how he rides is a very, very important part of this. But Jared thinks that those games don't mean anything.
So Jared referred to the 2017-2018 Colorado Avalanche. And I remember that series, Willie. You remember that series, that first round series. The Predators win the President's Trophy. They draw the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the playoffs. And that was when Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen and Gabriel Landeskog, among others, were on the come up. And the Avalanche gave the Predators all they could handle in that series. And I recall at the end of that series, which the Predators won, I believe, in 6 games, Willie, that Avalanche team is going to be good. Like, you could tell that was the beginning of what could be a dominant run for the Avalanche. And they ultimately did win the Stanley Cup 4 years later. Joe's counter argument to that was the Predators don't have a Nathan MacKinnon type. They don't have a Mikko Rantanen type. They don't have a prospect in their system yet who profiles as that franchise-altering type of prospect, which was the point that Scott Wheeler made with us on Friday. Now, maybe the Predators draft that player at number 5 in the NHL draft in about a month and a half. But in terms of the Jared versus Joe, I leaned more towards Joe. I do think that the Predators have to show significant improvement next season. I know that, as Jared said, there are sort of 2 timelines, right? The current timeline with the free agents that the Predators signed last summer and the prospects who are still developing. But I do think after how poorly this season went, the Predators need to be back in the mix. Now, Joe, I believe, said 95 points, make the playoffs and do damage in the playoffs. I don't know if I would go that far. But the argument I made to Jared and Joe while they were arguing, because I texted both of them, was the one thing that Barry Trotz has said a number of times that I disagree with him is this idea that, I signed Steven Stamkos, among others, to buy time for the younger prospects to have more time to develop. You do not sign Steven Stamkos, one of the greatest goal scorers of his generation, to quote unquote buy time. If you want to buy time, you sign Nick Foligno, you sign Jason Zucker, you sign Patrick Maroon. You do not sign 3 of the top free agents on the market in one fell swoop and spend more than $100 million total dollars in contracts to buy time. I can't imagine Barry Trotz sold Steven Stamkos on, hey, come to Nashville and keep Joakim Kimmel's seat warm for him. That did not happen. So I understand Jared's point, but I actually do side more with Joe. I think because of what the Predators did last summer, including signing UC Saros, it's important to win and win very quickly. So although I understand Jared's point, Willie, I actually side more with Joe on this one.
Well, I definitely think that both sides have a lot of merit, and that's where I come up with he's trying to thread the needle. There's no question he's trying to do what very few teams have been able to do historically, and that's win while you restock the cupboard. It's not easy to do, and you need a little bit of luck with this group of prospects that 1 or 2 guys do become big-time impact players. Maybe not superstars. I think that's probably unrealistic, but it would sure help if somebody made a big jump. And you can look at guys from some really good teams over the years that maybe go a little bit under the radar on great teams, like a Braden Point, who was, I think, a 3rd-round pick, a Jason Robertson, a Rope Hintz for Dallas, not first-round picks that have turned into really, really good players. That's kind of what you need to thread that needle, because especially Dallas, if you look at their evolution, they were never really bad. If you look, they won the lottery to move up to get Miro Heiskanen, who was the only guy who was like a top 4 or 5 pick that they have playing for them right now. They've hit on some low first-round picks and some non-first-round picks, home runs that have helped them build what they have right now, which is a chance to win a championship here. They've got the pieces, I think, to win it all. So I agree with you. The buy time thing, it's not about buying time. And that may be the underreported part of last season, the disappointment. They had a playoff team that played really well. Why wouldn't you want to augment it with high-end free agents? So it wasn't just that the free agents kind of didn't do a whole lot. It was that the rest of the team flopped around him. That's maybe the biggest mystery. That's probably the biggest thing that didn't go well is what happened to everybody that built that 99-point season the year before?
615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on this. Should Barry Trotz be judged by what happens next season, or must we wait until some of the top prospects develop? Let us know. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, I did stumble across an interesting statistic, Willie, about the tenures of NHL general managers, because that does relate to this conversation about Barry Trotz, and we will get to that next. 615-737-1025. Also, make sure to be listening at the end of the next segment because I have a ticket giveaway. So be sure to tune in for that. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. The 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament benefiting Folds of Honor presented by Gary Force Acura at Hermitage Golf Course is on Thursday, May 29th. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Talking Predators. Should Barry Trotz be judged by what happens next season, or must we wait until the prospects develop? Let's go to Bob and Antioch on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Bob, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I think you have to wait until the prospects develop. And I have a question I'd like to ask you guys. I'll be there every game next year. I'm a season ticket holder. But I just don't see that they're going to rebound enough to reemerge into the playoff picture. I'd like to know your thoughts. How do you guys feel about their prospects for next year? Will you be surprised if they seriously threaten for a playoff spot?
Thank you for the call, Bob. Willie, why don't you answer that question first?
Well, let's put it this way. I think every year there are several swing teams that, when it goes right, they're really good teams. I would use the Blues as an example. The Blues hadn't been a good team for 2 or 3 years. I don't know. I can't remember when the last time they made the playoffs, but they went dry a couple years, and then with basically the same guys and a little tweak of the coaching staff, and a couple of guys had good years, they looked really good going into the playoffs. They easily could have won. And then, the same group of guys could dip again next year. So I would put the Predators in that category. I would say this, that I don't think when the preseason playoff predictions come out next year, you will see the Predators in there very much. I think you might have some people take a flyer and say, well, I'll predict the Predators will come back, but those will be in a big minority. I think the consensus is they are not a playoff team for next year. But I'm optimistic that with another year under the belt of guys like Svechkov, Evangelista, LaRue, guys like that they're going to need, you'll get better contributions from those guys. And then I think UC Saros, Philip Forsberg, and Roman Josi really will define the season. Just like if you look, I'm using the Blues as an example. If Jordan Kyrou and Rob Thomas and the guys who are really supposed to be carrying the load have good years, then your team usually falls into line. So, Adam, would you agree with me that very few people will predict them to make the playoffs next year?
Fool me once,
especially in that division.
Fool me once. Was it fool me once, shame on you? Fool me twice, shame on me? Is that the saying?
Right.
I always get them mixed up. But I think that's what people.
I try not even to use that because I always mix it up.
I think that's what a lot of analysts are going to do next season, because I remember the Predators were a popular pick in the preseason because of the moves they made in the offseason. And after how it went, I think people are going to be a little gun shy on picking them again. Let's go to Matt on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Matt, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, guys. Hey, I really couldn't disagree with the last caller or Jared enough on this. You're using an intangible like younger players developing into something that, yes, the Predators have to draft well, but a lot of that comes down to how good those players naturally are. Vice judging this team for the holes that it has, the players that have left, the Ellie Tolvanens, which I know was technically on David Poile's watch, but Barry was kind of had the reins at that point.
No, he didn't. That was a full year. Hold on. That had nothing to do with Barry Trotz. That was a full year before.
That was before Trotz, Matt, I think.
He was still.
He was
there,
not in the
though,
background
remember?
or anything when that happened. That was in December. That was months and months before he was ever in the picture. That was not under Barry Trotz's watch. 0%.
All right. Lots and lots of players have left, young players, things that he individually.
Okay, so who are the players? Who are the players that have left and done really well?
And by the way, Matt, Ellie Tolvanen was waived in December of 2022.
Okay. So Andrew Carrier, Dante Fabro, players that we needed, holes that we had in the roster, things that the general manager should have a little bit more control over, Vice punting it down the line and saying, oh, well, we're not going to judge him until like these younger players are his salvation to see if he's a good general manager or not.
Thank you for the call, Matt. So look,
I think it's I think the Fabro thing definitely is not a good look. Fabro did well, and they got nothing for him.
Philip Tomasino is another player who's often mentioned in these discussions as well.
Right. So I think Tomasino and Parsonen are two guys that I just think kind of ran out of time, and at least they got something for them. And this happens around the league a lot, where players' clock kind of runs out. You can't send them to the minors anymore without waiving them and giving them up for nothing, like they did with Fabro. And so you move on, you get something else, and you hope it works out better that down the line. I don't think Tomasino and Parson, I could be wrong, are going to burn them like Tolvanen has. Getting nothing for Tolvanen obviously was a big swing and miss if you could do it over. Not that Tolvanen is a superstar, but he's a really good player for a fairly decent price. And that's what he could have been. Let's not act like he would have been the savior of the franchise, but you'd like to have him. He would be very useful, a 20-goal guy who can, do certain things really well.
Tolvanen has scored 55 goals. Tolvanen has scored 55 goals in 210 games since joining the Kraken.
Right. So it's about 20 or so goals a season, right? Am I right? Since he
had 23 goals. He had 23 goals this season, 16 goals the year before.
Yeah, and then the first year when they picked him, he had about 20.
He had 16 after being claimed off waivers.
Yeah, and he had a handful for the Predators before that. So he's an 18 to 20 goal guy. He's a good, solid NHL player who is better than a fringe player, right? I think Tomasino and Parsonen have to prove that they belong in the league right now. And Tomasino is going to get a chance because Pittsburgh is awful right now. They have no depth. So Tomasino is going to be given every opportunity to take it and run with it. Parsonen is changing teams, right? Or I think the Rangers kept him.
They re-signed him.
They re-signed him. So there's a new coaching staff. He'll get another chance. They're probably going to need some depth guys. But I don't know that those guys are going to blossom and be guys where you really regret not having them. The Carrier for
Justin Barron.
Justin Barron trade is a really interesting one to watch long term to see where both of those guys' careers go. Because in the short term, it was a big step back. Because Carrier is a lot older. You know what you're getting with Carrier. But I think Carrier has got to prove that, he's a winning player on a really good team. He provided a lot for Montreal. And so right now it's a big advantage for Montreal. But I think we saw something from Barron late in the season that tells you that he's got a ceiling that, especially for a very inexpensive price, he can be a good player for a good team if he continues along the path. He's still got a ways to go before he gets there.
615-737-1025. We actually have more reaction to get to. So we'll continue this conversation for another segment. 615-737-1025. Should Barry Trotz be judged by what happens next season with the Predators, or must we wait until the prospects develop? Let us know. 615-737-1025. By the way, I teased a ticket giveaway, and I'm going to do it now. Be caller number 3 at 615-737-1025, and you will win a pair of tickets to see Lil Baby at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, June 8th. Caller number 3. You will win a pair of tickets to see Lil Baby at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, June 8th. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie, Donick, Adam, Vingan, David, James here with you. Again, you may be confused as to why we're on at 10 o'clock versus Chase and Big Joe. Chase and Big Joe will be on today and tomorrow from noon to 3. Jared Stillman on vacation until Friday. So we're taking the opportunity to switch things up. So Willie and I will be on with you from 9 to noon today and tomorrow. Let's continue our conversation around the Predators, Willie, because we have a lot of reaction on our text line. Driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Caleb says, my take on the prospects is if any of them were going to be special, they would already be up on the team and showing signs. One texter says, all the draft talk is always the kids are young and don't know if they'll turn out. So the hope is that they will turn out. Hope that the young core develops. Hope that the coach develops and coaches well. Hope that the Preds win it all. You have then is all you have. Then Trotz's pencil path is BS. No real path, just hope. I hope I hit the lottery. That was one texter. Quite the run-on sentence there, my friend. A little punctuation never hurts. But Willie, I did stumble across something interesting over the weekend. Shayna Goldman at The Athletic wrote a story looking at NHL coach hiring trends, but she also took an opportunity to look at the tenures of NHL general managers. And according to Shayna Goldman, when the regular season ended, the average tenure of an NHL general manager was 4.79 years across all 32 teams. So let's round that up to 5. So the average tenure among current NHL GMs, at least when the regular season ended, was roughly 5 years. So Barry Trotz on this list from Shayna Goldman is at 1.86. So let's say Barry Trotz, based on those averages, 1.86. Let's say that Trotz, based on that number, he has 3 more years. Let's say that the 2025-2026 season represents one of 3 remaining years for Barry Trotz. If the 5 using the 5-year average that Shayna Goldman came up. So that puts him at, does that 20, 28, 29? My really rough math, 3 more years. And that's sort of
more or less. Yes.
Yeah. So
you're in that ballpark.
So that's what Jared is getting to with his argument on Jared versus Joe last week, is that by 2028, we'll know if the top prospects are good or not. The Predators may not be in a championship window by 2028, but you'll know. And again, he used the reference of the 2017-18 Colorado Avalanche, who lost to the Predators in the first round of the playoffs as an example. That Avalanche team wasn't ready to win the Stanley Cup, but you could tell they were on their way. And they ultimately did win the Stanley Cup. I would quibble with that comparison because that was, I would say, an extreme example because they had superstar players on their team from drafting at or near the top of the draft for several years. But I do think that if the average tenure of a GM is 5 years and Barry Trotz is entering year 3 as a full-time GM, I think that you do need to show substantial progress this season. If they don't make the playoffs next season, if they don't make the playoffs next season, a lot of Predators fans are going to be disappointed. I do think you need to show what I would consider meaningful progress. You need to be challenging for a playoff spot all year long. You can't start the season 0-5. But I do think that GMs in the NHL definitely have more wiggle room than coaches who are fired after what seems like 2 or 3 years at this point.
And remember that the Predators are pretty patient as a franchise historically. And I think that is a big, big trait that led Barry Trotz to stick with Andrew Brunette, is that philosophy, because it worked in his favor through the very long, painstaking, David Poile used to call it the tortoise and the hare. It took 6 years for the Predators to build a roster that was worthy of making the playoffs. And only after the league changed to a salary cap format did they really have a chance to win. And then since then, they've been one of the more consistent winning franchises in terms of competitive, making the playoffs type of teams. They've been in the top 10, I think, since that time, even though they haven't had as many deep runs as they would like. They've put themselves in position more often than not. I want to go back to one thing that the texters themes hit, and that is with the prospects. There are players that you would call, I like to call freaks, right? Guys who immediately at 18, 19, 20 are ready to make an impact, a big impact, and become that kind of cornerstone player. Those are very, very rare. And as Jared points out, most of the time, those guys are high first-round picks. You got to stink for a while to get access to those kind of guys. But when you say if they were good, they'd already be on the roster. Well, that's not true a lot of times. The mortals, right? There are really good players that do take until they're 22, 23, 24 sometimes before they become rock solid parts of a winning team. Is that fair to say, Adam? Like I think none of the I would agree that the Predators in their group right now do not have a freak on the rise. But they could have 3 or 4, and they're not all going to make it, right? We know who the guys are that they really hope become really good players. LaRue, Edstrom, Svechkov, Evangelista, and there are several others. They've got a lot. They're not all going to make it, but somewhere in there, they've got to have 4 to 6 become somebody like a Colton Sissons. I'm just thinking of other players that became really good role players. Dan Hamhuis, guys like that who are good, solid players that help a team win.
I would agree with that. And I think the gold
Craig Smith would be
right.
another guy. I was just thinking of other guys who they drafted and developed that weren't freaks, but they were really good.
Let's use the Dallas Stars for example, because Dallas to me represents
the model,
the gold standard of drafting and developing without having to tank to acquire all of their talent. Let's use Jason Robertson as an example. Jason Robertson, who's 25, he was a second-round pick in 2017. He did not become a full-time NHL player until the 2020-2021 season. He played 51 games in 2020. He had 45 points. He had 17 goals, 28 assists. So you could tell 45 points, 51 games, you have something special there. The following season, he jumps up from 45 points to 79 points, from 17 goals to 41 goals. The year after that, he goes from 79 points to 109 points, 46 goals, 63 assists. So even someone like Jason Robertson, who has become a high-end scorer in the NHL, didn't immediately go from the draft to being a 100-point player.
Right. I would put Roope Hintz.
Hintz is another example.
Behind.
Yes.
And he was not a first-round pick. Those are, I like how you use the gold standard, and because the Predators are gold.
I'm glad you caught that.
Those kind of guys are gold, right? The late bloomers, they make a big, big difference. Roman Josi is a freak, right? And he's a freak who's 34, so he's been there for a long time. I would say UC Saros is a freak. Neither of those guys were first-round picks. But where would they be without those two guys? Philip Forsberg is basically a freak. If he's not a freak, he's pretty close, because he blossomed at age 19 or 20 when he was rookie, close to a rookie of the year kind of candidate when he was 19 or 20 years old. I think 20 is when he really blossomed, right? So they didn't draft him, but they traded for him, and they got him when he was 18. So those are the three guys. But if you really look at it, they haven't drafted and hit on a guy like that in about 10 years.
And that's why
right?
Those 3 first-round picks that they have are so critical. Although, Willie, when we talked to Scott Wheeler last week, you asked him about the bottom of the first round, top of the second round, because the Predators have a cluster of picks in that range. And you asked him about the quality of the prospects. And Scott Wheeler, who is one of the Athletics' top NHL draft analysts, didn't seem so high on the quality of player that the Predators and other teams can draft in that range.
Right. And so if that's the consensus around the league, it may not be easy for Barry Trotz to use that draft capital to either draft players or use those picks to go get somebody in the middle class that we've been talking about, somebody maybe in the mid-20s that is an established player that could help right away. I think that really would be something that they're looking at. He mentioned hockey trades. How do you make a hockey trade? You package draft picks, maybe a prospect or two to get somebody that can help you right now. They're not looking for another 33-year-old guy. They're looking for a guy that's maybe more like that 26, 27-year-old who's more established. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially if people think this is a down year in the draft. But that's only what we think right now of these guys who are 18 years old. In 10 years, you might look back at this draft and say, you know, this was a pretty good draft. You just don't know. That's why you need a little bit of luck. I wonder how that. I don't know what the year was that Robertson and Hintz were drafted. I wonder how that draft was considered overall at the time.
Robertson was drafted in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Second round, 39th overall in 2017. Nico Hischier was the number one pick in the draft.
So there's a year where the number one guy wasn't a total freak. Hischier's a good player, but not a guy that is a franchise changer on his own. He's part of a good team right now. A good part of a good team.
By the way, Cody Glass, number 6 overall in 2017. So
yeah, there you go.
There you go. Justin in Greenbrier says, like Willie just said, we are used to the Predators being consistent contenders. This downward trend, especially when they acquired such big-name free agents last season, has been rare and disappointing. I want to give Trotz time, but if there is not significant improvement this season because he chose to hang on to Brunette, he is going to look pretty bad and his stock is going to fall. Now, Willie, you were not on with us in the middle of last week. Derek and I had this conversation on Tuesday, the day after Barry Trotz addressed reporters for about an hour for his end-of-season news conference. And I said that Trotz's decision to retain Brunette is a major inflection point of his tenure as Predators GM. Because if Brunette shakes off this bad season, learns from it, the Predators get back on track, Trotz is going to be lauded for having patience with Brunette when most GMs would not. And even Trotz said this last week, that this is a league where a lot of teams sometimes take the easy way out by firing the coach at the first sign of trouble. But if the Predators struggle and Brunette gets on that hot seat, which he's already on with the Predators fan base, but if that heats up even more, then if Trotz has to make the decision to fire Brunette in the middle of next season, let's say, it's going to reflect poorly on Trotz's decision making.
I'd like to know, Adam, I just thought of this as you were talking about this. How many of the current GMs were former coaches in the league? I would venture to say it's probably not that many now. It probably used to happen more, if I had to guess, but I don't know that. But I do think this is a defining trait of Barry Trotz, that he has a coach's DNA. And I would say, for better or worse, your greatest strength could be your greatest weakness at the same time. We used to talk about this with Mike Vrabel. His greatest strength might be loyalty, buys in. You're one of my guys. I'm with you, sink or swim. I'm with you until it's all over. But at the same time, he could be loyal to a fault. I think Barry Trotz has got that coach's DNA where it can be great, potentially, in standing by a coach who had a rough year, where others don't see it. But also that coach's mentality might lead you to certain decisions with players that a different type of GM, like a David Poile, who was never a coach, might make a different decision or see things differently. Does that make sense?
Yes. Off the top of my head,
I think that will be the defining moment. That will be the defining trait, I think, for Barry Trotz. Can a long-time coach in this day and age be a successful GM? Time will tell.
Off the top of my head, the only GM who I can think of who had coaching experience in the NHL, and he's not even the GM anymore, is Lou Lamoriello. Lou Lamoriello ended up on the bench, I feel like, a couple of times, like on an interim basis. But he was never a full-time coach, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of Lamoriello,
Joe Sakic was a player, but not a coach.
A lot of former players are GMs.
Are GMs.
But not. I think Trotz may be the only current GM who was a coach at the NHL level. Because
Just an interesting thing
right.
that I hadn't really given a lot of thought to, but I do think it is driving a lot of decisions he's made. Is the fact that he can't get out of it, right? He's been a coach his whole life, and he has transitioned to being a GM. And I think there are probably some things he's learned in that transition. Some of the things he's done, I think we would all say after that first year, he was doing an amazing job with his success rate in decisions that they made. And then it went equally as poor with how things turned out last year.
Just looking at this list, again, I see a lot of ex-players. Steve Yzerman, Ron Francis, Bill Guerin, Tom Fitzgerald, Kevin Adams, Chris Drury, Pat Verbeek, Mike Greer, Danny Briere, Craig Conroy. A lot of former players are GMs. I think Trotz, now I don't know if some of these GMs had coaching experience at other levels, junior
None of the
levels.
guys I think you mentioned.
No, but Trotz is unique in that he has the experience of being a coach, as you said. 615-737-1025. Well, Titans rookie minicamp has come and gone, and I told you things would happen, and they did happen. And we will discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Hey, your monthly business or your monthly bills keeping you up at night. If you worry about finances in these times where you're trying to figure out what's going on with our financial world, what am I looking at down the road? And in the meantime, you're getting carved up by some debt. Maybe it's a credit card debt with a high interest rate. Maybe it's a car payment that you'd love to make some headway on, but you're losing money each month because of that. Well, Loan Pronto has a great tool for you. If you own a home, you have a super easy way of accessing cash out of your home's equity, and you can get a better rate. You can save money month to month by taking up thousands of dollars out of your home's equity and then knocking out that credit card bill or that car payment. You could even use it to start a home improvement project. Most homeowners who do this end up wiping out that debt and then cutting their monthly expenses. So that's a good combination. Talk about it with the folks from Loan Pronto. You don't have to keep stressing about money. Call them right now for fast debt relief. 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLS consumeraccess.org.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Again, switching up the lineup this week. Chase and Big Joe from noon to 3. Jake Lyman and Derek Mason from 3 to 6 today and tomorrow. But Willie, I said something was going to happen before we broke our show on Friday, and it indeed happened. All of these fancy
absolutely perfect.
All of these fancy social media videos from Titans rookie minicamp. I'm looking at one right now, the one that I was waiting for over the weekend. Cam Ward throwing to Xavier Restrepo. Cam Ward, he goes back, he throws a tight spiral. The video slows down for a second to show you how great of a spiral it is. Catches Xavier Restrepo in stride. And I just went to the quote tweets. And I don't know who Greg Kett is. Greg, if you're listening, I'm sorry for picking on you. But Greg Kett quote tweeted this tweet from the Titans and said, "I've seen enough. 1,000 receiving yards incoming."
I have to hope there's some sarcasm there.
I would hope too.
I was hoping you were going to say somebody quote tweeted and said, Adam Vingan said exactly. It's as if somebody with the camera said, let's create what Adam Vingan described in detail what was going to happen on Friday. It could not have been a more perfect example.
Yes.
Of the perfect rep in a drill that ultimately tells you nothing about the future of a quarterback.
Absolutely not. It's the video, by the way, is 4 total seconds, but you can extrapolate everything from 4 total seconds. By the way, I do feel kind of bad for Cam Ward, and this is why. We were talking about baseball at the top of the show. Vanderbilt winning 2 out of 3 in Knoxville against Tennessee. Cam Ward, his first time running out of the tunnel at Nissan Stadium, was at a Savannah Bananas game over the weekend with a sold-out crowd, reportedly, of 70,000 people. Cam, I'm here to tell you, man, I don't think that's going to happen again when you're playing football at Nissan Stadium. So I hope you soaked in the adulation of a sold-out Nissan Stadium, because I'm not sure that's actually going to happen when you're playing football. So I think it might have been some false advertising.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting what they're going to try to do in all seriousness of, they got to try to sell some tickets between now and the day that the new stadium opens. And we last week had a long conversation about the process that's ongoing of selling the seats in the new stadium. That's where the focus is right now. But in the meantime, who's going to buy seats to the old stadium, knowing all that construction's going on around the stadium? You got to really want to go right now.
I don't know much about the Savannah Bananas. I know that they are incredibly popular. I saw a lot of people wearing Savannah Bananas gear around town yesterday when I was out.
It's
for
a
Mother's
phenomenon.
Day.
It really is a
How
phenomenon.
do you feel about it? You're a baseball purist, right? You're a baseball player. You're a baseball fan. How do you feel about the Savannah Bananas?
I'm not going to say anything bad about them. It's like a Harlem Globetrotters modern day thing for baseball, right? There was a time where the Harlem Globetrotters, when I was a kid, were a phenomenon. It was so much fun to watch them. They had a cartoon on Saturday mornings with all the characters. They were on ABC's Wide World of Sports all the time, and I always loved watching. But you came to understand as you get older the difference between, just tricks and fun and skits versus the real sports. Even though I think there was a time at the beginning of the Harlem Globetrotters that a lot of basketball experts would tell you that those guys probably could hang with top-level professional players. And so, the Bananas, I don't follow them very closely. It's just not my jam. I'm much more going to just watch baseball. I'm not one of those guys that thinks the game is, quote, boring, or you need to spice up baseball. I was always going to watch, and I think the things like the pitch clock and some of the other things they've done to get the pace back to where it needed to be have been wildly successful. So I'm all in on the product of baseball. The Bananas they're the Globetrotters, right? It's tricks, it's things like that. And I feel like the genesis of it was baseball is boring. So that's the only strike I have against them. But what those guys do is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty amazing, and you can't knock the success when you can sell that many tickets wherever you go. It's incredible what they're doing.
So Cam Ward receives a hero's welcome at Nissan Stadium. Cam, slice that attendance about half and about half. Make it like 35, 40,000 maybe a little bit more than that. You're not going to have that type of crowd at Nissan Stadium, at least to start. So I'm glad that he got that.
Maybe on opening day.
Maybe in week
if you
one.
play the Packers.
And by the way, the NFL schedule release is on Wednesday, which I always find to be such a fascinating thing because this is proof that that people are obsessed with the NFL. That the NFL schedule reveal show is, for a lot of football fans, must-see television. We already know who they're playing. Like, I know that we find out in what order each team is playing the other team. It would be much more exciting for me if we didn't know who the opponents were and we found out everything on that show, kind of like Selection Sunday, for example. But I just find it fascinating how we lap it up, man. We're going to find out who the Titans are playing in week 1, week 2, week 3. We already know the teams. We just find out the order. So I'm sure we'll talk about that on Wednesday. But
oh gosh, yes, it's just something that happens in the off season to tide us over for a little bit. It's again, our analysis. In fact, maybe that's what we should try to do to try to shake it up. Is try to take a few clips of, or like maybe we'll all have our take. This is the number one thing to learn on May 15th, and then come back and play it on September 1st or September 15th and see how much it's changed from then until now, because it always does, right?
Absolutely.
This is the toughest schedule that's ever come out in the history of how could they have the bye week this week? And they've got to play X, Y, and Z on 3 consecutive weeks. They're never going to be able to survive. Look how tough that schedule is. And then you completely feel differently on September 15th. So let's see if we can maybe try that. And on the front end, we'll first guess ourselves.
That sounds like a good idea. But before Willie, you do have to depart in a little bit. But before we let you go, Paul Kuharsky wrote an interesting story at his website the other day, comparing the supporting cast of Cam Ward versus those of other rookie quarterbacks in Tennessee Titans history. He broke down each quarterback's wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, and offensive linemen, and then rated them by category: best receivers, best running backs, best tight ends, and best offensive line. And when it comes to Cam Ward, according to Paul Kuharsky, he has the best crop of receivers: Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Treylon Burks, Van Jefferson, Alec Ayomanor, Chimere Dike, Bryce Oliver, and Xavier Restrepo. He writes, it's based on a lot of promise, but also on how bad the groups for the other quarterbacks have been. They are listed in order of production in that season: Damian Williams and Lavelle Hawkins as second and third for Jake Locker. Marcus Mariota's rookie group was horrible. DeAndre Hopkins was big for Will Levis, and NWI chipped in with 3 touchdowns, but no other wideout saw the end zone. So I thought it was interesting to get a look, Willie. We'll start with the receivers that each rookie quarterback had at his disposal. So Vince Young.
So this is only among the Titans guys, not recent first overall pick.
He starts with Vince Young. Okay. He includes Vince Young, Jake Locker, Marcus Mariota, Will Levis, and Cam Ward. So just receivers for Vince Young: Drew Bennett, Brandon Jones, Bobby Wade, Roydell Williams, and David Givens. For Jake Locker, Nate Washington, Damian Williams, Lavelle Hawkins, Kenny Britt, Mark Mariani, and Donnie Avery. For Marcus Mariota, Kendall Wright, Harry Douglas, Dorial Green Beckham, and Justin Hunter. Woof. For Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Chris Moore, Treylon Burks, and Kyle Phillips. And then, of course, Cam Ward, Ridley, Lockett, Burks, Jefferson, Ayomanor, DK, Oliver, and Restrepo. Does Cam Ward have the best group of those quarterbacks?
You know, at first, when you first hit me with that, before you read the names of the previous guys, I would have said, golly, could that possibly be true? But I think after hearing all the names, I think Paul is right by default. Just Ridley alone and his production in the league, not that he is blown everybody away, but he's an established guy. Who would be the next best receiver on the list in terms of credentials at the time of the previous, all those lists? I can't think of one, right? There's a lot of guys who never really panned out.
Well, DeAndre Hopkins.
That makes up about 80. Okay, Hopkins for sure. But Ridley, yeah, I'd say Hopkins for Levis. But I'm thinking for the Vince Young and Jake Locker group.
Jake
I
Locker
don't think
had
there's one in there, right?
Jake Locker had Nate Washington. Vince Young had Drew Bennett. Marcus Mariota had Kendall Wright. Levis had DeAndre Hopkins as their top receivers.
Vince Young had Drew Bennett?
In 2006, according to Paul Kaharski.
Okay, so Bennett stayed maybe one more year after, but Bennett, I don't think had a real good year that year. That was after D Mace left, I think. If I've got the years right in my head. But
I
yeah,
will check it out.
It's not what you want the core to be, and also I think we can keep in mind that the Jeff Fisher years, and even that ran into Mike Munchak, I think it was much more predicated on run game first, running game, tight ends, much more than wide receivers. That's really the history of the franchise. D Mace makes this point a lot. That really the way they've gone about it has not been about the wide receiver position, partially because they just have not drafted very many good wide receivers over the years.
615-737-1025. We will continue this conversation with the big boss man, Chase McCabe. Chase will join me for the rest of the program. Willie must depart so he can come back to Nashville and be in studio with us tomorrow. So safe travels, Willie. We will talk to you tomorrow. Chase McCabe will continue the conversation with me. Coming up next, you can get in on it as well at 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Adam Vingan here with you, and that music can mean only one thing. No, it's not Triple H, it's Chase McCabe. Hi, Chase.
What's up, Adam?
How are you?
Well done, David James. Well done. I'm good.
Always got you.
Good.
So
Good to be here.
Chase will be in with me for the remainder of the show. Willie is en route to the airport to head back to Nashville. He will be live in studio with me once again tomorrow from 9 to noon. Chase and Big Joe today and tomorrow from 12 to 3. So, Chase, we were talking about Paul Gaharski's article at his website comparing Cam Ward's supporting cast to those of other recent rookie quarterbacks for the Tennessee Titans. Vince Young in 2006, Jake Locker in 2011, Marcus Mariota in 2015, Will Levis in 2023, and Cam Ward, of course, this upcoming season. And according to Gaharski, Cam Ward has the best group of receivers. As he notes, it's based on a lot of promise, but it also shows how bad the groups for the other quarterbacks have been. When it comes to running backs, no surprise here, Chase. Paul Gaharski has Will Levis as the quote-unquote winner because he has Derrick Henry. He has Derrick Henry. But the other two I wanted to discuss, which I think...
Who did Vince have? Lindell White?
Vince's
Chris Brown?
top running back was Travis Henry.
Travis Henry.
Travis
right.
Henry.
Okay.
Have Travis Henry, Lendell
A different
White.
Henry.
Yes,
Yeah.
a different Henry. Travis Henry, no relation. Lendell White and Chris Brown. Jake Locker, Chris Johnson. Is it Javon Ringer?
Yeah.
Jamie Harper and Ahmad Hall.
Oh,
Marcus Mariota, Antonio Andrews,
Ugh.
Dexter McCluster, David Cobbin, Bishop Sankey.
oh.
Funny story about Bishop Sankey. So when I was at the Tennessean, when the
He was an
Predator,
NFL football player? Yeah, that is a funny story.
that is a funny story. When I was at the Tennessean during the Predators off seasons, I would pitch in at Titans training camp.
Yep.
And I sort of became the kiss of death. If I was writing about you as a Titans player during training camp, you were probably getting cut. I remember writing a story about Bishop Sankey. He was cut. I wrote a story about Justin Hunter. He was cut. I wrote a story about Dorial Green Beckham. He was traded for Dennis Kelly. So Bishop Sankey, he was the first one who suffered the Adam Vingan Tennessean training camp curse, I suppose. But Will Levis had Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears, and Cam Ward will have Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears as well. Let's talk about the tight ends. I guess the tight end position would also be sort of a runaway here for Marcus Mariota because he had Delaney Walker.
Yeah.
Vince Young had, is it Bo Scaife?
Bo Scaife.
Bo Scaife.
Yeah, he wasn't bad.
Jake
yeah.
Locker had Jared Cook.
Cookie.
Marcus had Delaney Walker. Will Levis had Chig Okonkwo, and Cam Ward will also have Chig Okonkwo and Gunnar Helm.
Okay, that one's probably a little. I mean, Delaney, yes. Delaney's the second best. There could be an argument best tight end that the Titans have ever had, but I'd probably take Frank just a tick above him. But Scaife wasn't terrible. And then who's the other one you said for Locker?
Locker had Jared Cook.
Jared Cook. That was early in Jared Cook's career, but Cook was pretty good. And I think had he stayed here, could have been even better. But I mean, I would definitely agree that it's Delaney, but that one's maybe a little closer than some of the others.
So Paul Gaharski gave Vince Young the best offensive line. He had Michael Roos, Jacob Bell, Kevin Mawai, Benji Olsen, and David Stewart as his offensive linemen.
Benji was still playing
in 2006. Gaharski notes that 3 high-quality players in Roos, Olsen, and Stewart with a Hall of Famer in Mawai at center under Mike Munchak as the position coach. It was a different era when good offensive lines were to be expected and were a regular feature of the team. And I'm curious about how close this offensive line could get to that offensive line. Gaharski writes, quote, "These Titans have invested a great deal of resources into the line. It's got 2 first-round picks, a big free agent contract at left tackle in Dan Moore, the guy who was the best free agent center in 2024 in Lloyd Cushenberry, though coming off injury, and a new wily veteran at right guard in Kevin Zeitler. The group has a lot to prove before we're going to put it in the category with the people on the 2006 line." But just get a load at some of these other lines that these other rookie quarterbacks had.
This is going to hurt.
All right. Jake Locker, Michael Roos, Leroy Harris, Eugene Amano, Jake Scott, and David Stewart.
Not terrible.
Marcus Mariota had Taylor Lewan, Byron Bell / Quentin Spain, Brian Schwenke / Andy Gallick, Chance Warmack, Jeremiah Potassi, and Byron Bell. Ugh, is right. 2023. Get ready to hold your nose, Titans fans. Andre Dillard, Peter Skoronski, Aaron Brewer, Daniel Brunskill, Dylan Radins, and Chris Hubbard.
What a crew.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
Yikes is right. But congratulations to Andre Dillard. He got a job. Same with Nicholas
Well.
Petit Frere.
You got invited. We'll see. We'll see about that.
Like I said, good luck to Brock Purdy in San Francisco if Andre Dillard or Nicholas Petit Frere have to protect you, especially at the same time. If they're both playing, things aren't going well. But the offensive line, of course, Chase, is an incredibly important thing for this team now that it has Cam Ward. And we talked about the signing of Dan Moore when it happened in free agency. They opened the checkbook for Dan Moore. And I know that people found his statistics from his time in Pittsburgh and how many sacks he allowed. And it led to a conversation about whether it was his fault or Russell Wilson's fault or Justin Fields' fault. But as Jared said, and I agree with him on this, that Dan Moore was an everyday starting left tackle for a playoff team. And that can't be discounted. I like moving J.C. Latham back to his natural position. You have Kevin Zeitler, a steady veteran at right guard. I'm curious about Lloyd Cushenberry coming off that injury. I don't know how quick he is going to be to get back to 100% or as close to 100% as a player can be. I have a lot of high hopes for this offensive line, but the recent past is leaving me just a bit skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I want to see it play out, but I'm kind of with you that I feel a lot better about it than I have in the last few years. That it's got that dangerous word potential to build into something. And I'm also curious of kind of what their plan's going to be for is it Slater, who they just drafted, Jackson Slater, out of Sacramento State. That, you know, I think Zeitler's kind of a one-year deal. See how that goes. The hope is Slater can be behind him, learn a little bit, and then he'll be ready to take over next year. But to your point on Cushenberry, he may not be ready for the start of the season, but I mean they got contingency plans there with Levin. I mean, Corey Levin's been around a while. I think he's serviceable. So they could do that, or potentially still bring somebody in. So Daniel Brunskill's still out there, I think. So I don't think he's signed anywhere. So there's a chance that they could try and bring him back as kind of the backup center. So I don't know, but it's got to definitely play out. Like everything's got to come together. But I feel better about it, especially with guys like Latham and Skoronski now going into year 2 under Bill Callahan.
What was your favorite overreaction that you saw on social media about Titans rookie minicamp?
Well, probably the crap that Stillman was starting with Restrepo, which I know we're going to talk about.
We're going to get into that. And I know he's listening because he's already texted me today.
Of course he is. I mean, he goes to the beach and listens.
I had to scold him this weekend. I saw the tweet about Xavier Restrepo, which, again, we will discuss after we have Teron Davenport on at 11 o'clock. I saw the tweet about Xavier Restrepo, and I texted him, I guess it would have been yesterday morning, on Mother's Day, and he's with his girlfriend, Lindsay, who is a new mother, so you should be showering her with affection on your tropical vacation. And I had to text Jared and said, I'm sure your girlfriend loves the fact that you are crap posting. I used a different word than crap posting about Xavier Restrepo while you're on the beach. Put the phone down. And it didn't work because he's still tweeting and texting.
Yep. That's how he rolls. But that's okay.
Yes.
We appreciate him always checking in.
Absolutely. But yes, Xavier Restrepo overreaction. I found a quote tweet from a Titans fan of the video that the Titans posted of Cam Ward throwing to Xavier Restrepo. And the fan said, calling it now, 1,000-yard season. Oh boy.
I'm not going that far, but let me. All right, because I'm going to talk about this on Chasing Big Joe. Brett Kern's going to be in studio for the first hour, and I'm going to get into this with him. If you named, let's say, 7 receivers right now to make this team, I struggle when I get past 4 to really be definitive. I mean, Ridley Lockett, Ioman, how do you say it? Iomanner and DK. Like, those are the 2 rookies. I know they're 4th-round picks, but I have them making the team. Van Jefferson probably, but I don't feel great about it. I don't feel great about Burks. I think Burks has played his last down as a Titan, if I'm being honest with you. And then they love Bryce Oliver. You got Restrepo. I mean, you got Some of the other jabronis what is it? Jared always says
Scarbinis.
that are around. But I mean, like Colton Dowell, okay, what is he? Jaquan Jackson, what is he? Mason Kinsey's going into his 18th training camp. It seems like they signed James Prochet, who's been around a while, but he's basically a special teams guy. So I mean, to me, Restrepo has a better shot than any of them to make the team because counter to Jared's point, like you want a guy that the quarterback's comfortable with. Plus,
you
if he
said-
outplays these guys, like he's going to make the team.
So you said you had trouble after how many?
Really 4 because I don't know what Jefferson has left in the tank. But I mean, right now I have him.
Would Burks make the team by default if he's injured?
Yeah, but I mean, he'd probably start on the pup or
Right. Okay.
IR.
I agree with Ridley, Lockett, obviously, Manor, and DK because they were draft picks. You bring in Van Jefferson to be that veteran, good hand. I'll have him there as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's there.
So that's 5 already.
Right.
And I haven't even mentioned Burks. And I'm wondering if it comes down to Bryce Oliver versus Xavier Restrepo.
Which I think is what's going to happen.
And Austin Stanley of A to Z Sports tweeted this over the weekend, and I agree. Xavier Restrepo will be the most hyped up undrafted free agent in franchise history.
Oh, no question.
And because the ingredients are there, because of his connection with Cam Ward. And we'll talk a little bit more about Xavier Restrepo later in the final hour, because again, I need to roast Jared for this ridiculous tweet that he had over the weekend. Well, he should have been paying attention to his girlfriend on their tropical vacation. But we will also talk about Xavier Restrepo and more with Teron Davenport, who was at Titans rookie minicamp over the weekend. Teron will join us next. 615-737-1025. Chase McCabe, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace Finken and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Adam Vingan in with Chase McCabe this hour, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by our guy, Teron Davenport, ESPN, NFL Nation, Titans reporter. Teron, of course, you were out at rookie minicamp over the weekend. Everybody wants to know what Cam Ward looked like. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you like about what you saw from Cam Ward over the weekend?
Well, it wasn't like he was fully competing and 7-on-7 and team period and all of that. It was more of an instructional practice. But what we got to see was just him out there in action. I think that was the highlight of it for me, seeing the leadership shine through, right? He and Alec Iomanner, they didn't have a rep that he liked, and so he called him back, and he went back in line, and they completed it, and it was done the right way. Those are the things that I liked about him. I've seen the different arm angles and the zip on the ball; those were all good. But I mean, it has to be contained because this is just the beginning.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but the lid is already off of that jar, my friend. There are overreactions everywhere.
Come on, TD. You know how this works.
Including with one player in particular, Xavier Restrepo. Titans fans really want Xavier Restrepo to succeed because of his connection with Cam Ward. But in your mini camp notes that you posted on social media on Saturday, you said, quote, Xavier Restrepo was first in line for wide receiver drills. He's the most polished of the wide receivers here. So take us through what you saw from Xavier Restrepo, understanding, as you said, it was only one practice, but what did you like about Restrepo? Why did he come off as the most polished of the wide receivers?
Well, the footwork is a lot quicker. It's cleaner, in and out of the breaks and those types of things. The route running, catching the ball with extreme confidence, all of those things were there. And that's no slight on Chimere Dike or Alec Iomanner. There's no slight at all on TJ Sheffield or any of the other guys that were out there. It's just, look, man, Restrepo played a lot of football. You got to remember that. This guy has played a lot of football in college and obviously before then. So naturally he's going to be the most polished out of all of them. And he's just a flat out, he's a football player. He's a good one at that. So he wasn't drafted as high because of the measurables and whatnot. But I mean, he looked good. He looked smooth. He looked fluent, and he caught the ball more consistently than anybody. His routes were more crisp than anybody. The routes on air, so make of it what you will, but he was the most polished out of all of them.
Brian Callahan was asked after practice about Xavier Restrepo's 40 time, which is something that a lot of people have brought up, probably played a role in him not being drafted. How much stock do you put into that? And do you think that Xavier Restrepo should be dinged for his less than stellar 40 time?
Well, it's a part of the equation, right? So, yes, you do need to cause that to go back to the film and say, okay, wait a minute. Was there a time where he was too slow? I don't remember seeing any times where he was too slow. I watched 4 or 5 games. I don't remember seeing it. But I will say this. It is, like I said, a part of it. So you're going to, ding him for it, to use your word. At the same time, you got to remember what you're asking him to do. You're not going to ask him to run in a straight line too often for 40 yards. Like, that's just not what you have him do. You have him run all the underneath stuff. Sometimes you give him those deep overlooks and stuff like that. I mean, he just so happened to have a 77-yard reception on a deep over against Cal. If you go back and look at that last drive, the 92-yarder to take the lead. So, I mean, it's not like he can't do that type of stuff.
Because a lot of the attention, obviously, Teron Davenport with us. Obviously, a lot of the attention, Teron, was on the offensive side of the ball with Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, and others. But who stood out to you on the defensive side of the ball at practice?
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't see much of the defense because obviously we were focusing on install and everything with the offense. But, I mean, you got to mention Femi Oladejo, just the energy that he had and how he was just kind of directing some of the guys and cheering them on. And, he's a rookie just like them. They all had the same amount of time with the playbook, et cetera, but he was a guy that definitely emerged as a leader. And I'm curious to see how that will transfer over to working with the veterans. I think between he and Arden Key, that's going to give a lot of energy to that outside backer group.
ESPN's Sharon Davenport joining us here on DVD. What's up, TD? Been a minute that I've gotten to talk to you. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Doing really well.
As I look at the receivers, and granted, I know this is post-rookie minicamp, pre-OTAs, pre-training camp, all that stuff. But as I try and put 7 receivers on this roster, give or take, maybe it's 6, maybe it's more than that, who knows? I can't find a scenario where I don't have Restrepo making it. Now, I kind of look at that it could be, Oliver and Restrepo down to that final spot. It could be those two and Burks down to that final spot. Because, look, I don't think it's a lock that Treylon Burks is on this team. In fact, I think he's played his last down as a Titan, if I'm just being honest. How do you look at this receiver battle today on May 12th with training camp still several months away?
Yeah, I think they still try to get one last squeeze out of the Treylon Burks contract or era, so to speak. So I think eventually he'll land on the roster. But, I doubt they keep 7. 6 is reasonable. And when you look at Chimere DK, he was one of the guys back there on punt return. He didn't do that too often at Wisconsin or Florida, but, it's something that he will do here. So you have him. Van Jefferson is going to be an interesting one because I honestly wonder, okay, are they going to – because I've seen a team, sign a veteran and it's like, okay, yeah, that veteran's on the roster. And then it comes time to make the final cuts and everything, and he doesn't. So I'm not saying that Van Jefferson is a guarantee, but he's, it's more or less he, Bryce Oliver, Restrepo, Mason Kinsey, a lot of these guys fighting for those last two spots, and it's going to be interesting watching that play out.
When you think about undrafted free agents in Titans history, is Drew Bennett probably the best one that comes to mind? Is that what Restrepo or anyone else would have to live up to?
Well, Bennett was a different type of receiver. He was asked to do different things, but I think you could put Restrepo more along the Mark Mariani reigns. Now, he's not the same returner as Mariani, whatsoever. But I was talking to Coach Mack before practice, and I told him, I said, if you want somebody to get back there and he's going to catch the football on punt return, hey, that's your guy. You know what I mean? He's not going to get you too much return yardage, but he will give you that security back there when you need it. So I think special teams can be a ticket onto the roster for him, but it's just at his size. I don't know how much contribution you could get from him as a gunner or as on kickoff team or anything like that. But he's just really just like slot and punt returner, and he's just going to have to be a heck of a slot in order to make it onto the roster.
The schedule release is Wednesday. Over, under 1.5 primetime games for the Titans.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I would take the over. I feel like the Chiefs game is going to be a primetime one. That'll be like a Sunday night football one. Just the young gun against the GOAT. You know what I mean? Get Cam Ward against Patrick Mahomes. I think that may draw some primetime interest. Obviously, the Patriots game is going to be one for all the million of stories on that one.
I was also going to say the Patriots game as well, Tron. I want to ask you about something outside of Tennessee. Last week, the Pittsburgh Steelers traded George Pickens to Chase's Dallas Cowboys. An interesting move there. What do you make of that fit and George Pickens as a receiver? Because to me, he is what I would call a boomer bust type of guy. He is capable of having huge games, but I feel like there's no in between. He's either making a huge impact on the game or he's not. What did you think of that trade in particular and Pickens as a receiver?
Well, you kind of knew it was going to happen. I will say that Pickens is, he's a legitimate deep threat. He'll give you the acrobatic catches and he'll block for you. It's just, he showed it even in college. I remember freshman year, he got ejected from a game for fighting, and they were rumbling all the way into the end zone. You got to have the locker room to be able to absorb that. I'm curious, how that will work in Dallas. But if he hits and you have that compliment to CeeDee Lamb, like that could be a very, very lethal tandem. So I look forward to watching it work out. He's a guy that I know somebody had asked about him coming to the Titans. I was like, yeah, that locker room, I don't know if that's a place where they would want him, where he would be a good influence. But you never know in Dallas. They have some veterans there. You got CeeDee Lamb there, so we'll see what happens.
Speaking of receivers, Teron, there are a few veteran wide receivers still looking for work. And depending on what happens in OTAs and training camp, could you see the Titans having interest in one of those veteran receivers? I believe Amari Cooper is still looking for work. Keenan Allen is still looking for work, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but could you see the Titans sniffing around those receivers depending on what happens in training camp and during the offseason?
No, I doubt they do any of that. I mean, they got 12, 13 of them on the roster right now. I think they have enough guys to choose from. And like I said earlier, you got 5 or 6 guys competing for those last 2 spots. They're in good, number-wise, good shape.
Who do you see as someone who could emerge as a key punt returner for this team? I believe you said over the weekend that Xavier Restrepo took some reps there. DK took some reps there. Jaquan Jackson still on the team, had some struggles in that department during the season. Is there a player that you're looking at as someone who could solidify that position?
If they could find an extra spot on the roster, and if the guy flashes right away, Virgil Lemons, he's an undrafted free agent, cornerback. He's okay as a corner. He's solid as a corner, but the punt return aspect, I mean, he averaged 25 yards a punt return. Now, granted, it's at Western Florida, so it's not against the same level of competition as the SEC, but if he could show something quickly, and we know John Fossil is no stranger to bringing a guy that just came out of nowhere onto the scene. So I definitely will watch that. 602 punt return yards last year. He was legit, man. He's about 6 feet, 180 pounds, so he's a wiry guy, but he has super speed, and he made a lot of plays in college. So that's somebody, if you want like a sleeper. You still got to look at Chimere DK, who was back there. He brings a lot too, as well, from a speed perspective. So we'll see.
Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, joining us on D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick as he does every Monday. Teron, great stuff as always, my friend. We'll catch up next week.
I appreciate it. Take it easy.
Teron Davenport on the program. 615-737-1025. We will take your thoughts on Titans minicamp, your favorite overreactions, because boy, did I see plenty.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to talk about the king of overreaction coming up next, because Chase, you're here so I can quote The Simpsons and you'll know what I'm talking about. To quote Superintendent Chalmers talking about Principal Seymour Skinner, the rod up Jared's butt must have a rod up its butt. And
Yep.
I'll explain. Coming up next, Chase McCabe, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Xavier Restrepo out of your wide receiver group?
You know, Xavier's been a really productive college player. I mean, you look at all the names of receivers that have played at the University of Miami, and he's at the top, which is impressive. He might not necessarily be the biggest or the fastest player that's probably ever come out of Miami, but he's been incredibly productive, and he's found ways to play football the right way. So he'll start out as a slot player for us, and he'll have every chance to compete just like everybody else will. But you look at his production and what he's done as a football player, and he puts himself in pretty good position to be competitive. And even though he didn't run the fastest time in the world, I'm excited to see what he can do.
So the 40 time wasn't that big a deal for you guys?
I mean, it all matters. Yeah, I mean, it matters. But I think you see the football player and you see the speed that he plays with when he plays. I wouldn't have thought that would have been the time that he ran. But you know, that's how you go from a potential draft pick to being an undrafted free agent at the end of the day. And he's got a lot to prove, and I'm excited to see him do it.
That was Brian Callahan over the weekend discussing Xavier Restrepo. Chase McCabe, Adam Vingan. We are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Once again, we're switching things up this week, so Chase and Big Joe will be on from noon to 3 today and tomorrow. Chase, you have Brett Kern sitting in with you for the first half of the show today.
Yeah, Big Joe had a prior speaking engagement at the Waffle College, so he has to do that. And so Brett Kern is going to come in and hang out with me for the first hour, and then JoJo will be in sometime in hour number 2.
And you also have Tim Corbin on today at 2 o'clock after Vanderbilt wins a series at Tennessee. Okay. So as I said, to quote Superintendent Chalmers talking about Principal Skinner on The Simpsons.
Super Nintendo Chalmers.
Or Super Nintendo Chalmers if you're Ralph Wiggum. The rod up Jared Stillman's butt must have a rod up its butt when it comes to Xavier Restrepo. Now, keep in mind, when Jared sent this tweet out on Saturday evening, Jared is out of the country. He is in a tropical location. He is with his girlfriend. They are young parents. This might be the first time the two of them have been away from little Jack Stillman. And yet Jared can't help himself. He can't put the phone down and unleash takes on the world, even when he's thousands of miles away from Nashville, Tennessee. This was the tweet. Quote, I don't know. I don't have a good Jared Stillman impression. I'll have to work on it.
I don't have a good one either.
Why does Titans Twitter want Xavier Restrepo to be a star? You drafted 2 rookie wide receivers who actually run. You should be cheering for them. Restrepo can't play outside or do anything meaningful on special teams. Who cares that he's Cam Ward's buddy? Cam can get new, better ones. I wish I was making that up. That is I feel like if I went to ChatGPT and said, hey, ChatGPT, can you create a Jared Stillman ridiculous take for me? That's what it would spit out. And
I wonder what ChatGPT would do if we asked it to do that.
Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that while I discuss this? So, Chase, I call it the Hard Knocks effect. I used to watch Hard Knocks every single summer. I haven't caught up with it over the past couple of years, but one of the things that you could always count on for Hard Knocks is the story of the scrappy, undrafted free agent you've never heard of who's trying to make a name for himself in the NFL. And you meet his family, and you meet his girlfriend, and you meet his dog, and you watch him in the preseason games. And then they have that final meeting where he sits down with the coach and he learns his fate. Did he make the team? Xavier Restrepo was a little bit different because he did have a celebrated career at the University of Miami, and he has a great rapport with the Titans' presumed starting quarterback. But a lot of Titans fans are taking an interest in Xavier Restrepo because they saw how he performed with Cam Ward as his quarterback. And this idea, again, to quote Jared, why does Titans Twitter want Xavier Restrepo to be a star? Why shouldn't fans of a team want the team who has struggled to find wide receivers? Why shouldn't they want a good wide receiver?
Exactly. Mingo. That's the thing. I don't care of all the guys that are on this team right now, especially the either the drafted or the undrafted guys. I don't care if their name is Xavier Restrepo or David James. I just need one of them to be good. Like just I don't care. And Titans fans don't care. They just want one of them to ball out and be good and hope that Ridley and Lockett can kind of do their thing too. So it shouldn't matter. And Jared, complaining about, well, he needs new friends. He doesn't need his old friend and all that stuff. Like, who cares? Like, if they're good, if they get on the same page, and all of a sudden Restrepo, becomes the greatest undrafted wide receiver in Titans history, okay, I'll take it. I don't care. Like, I just need one of them to work out.
Look, I know he ran a 4.85 40, which did play a role in him going undrafted. But to your point, that last line, Cam could get new, better friends. It's like you go, you have your high school buddies, and then you go off to college and you meet new friends, and then you come home for Thanksgiving for the first time, and you're seeing your old high school friends, and you're just like, yeah, these old high school friends, they're not as cool as my college friends. Like, I don't want to hang out with them anymore. That's what it reminded me of. Cam can get new, better ones. By the way, this was ratioed, this tweet, to the extreme. Oh, yeah. It has 139 replies and 52 retweets, most of which are quote tweets saying, this is the stupidest thing you've ever said, Jared, and you've said a lot of stupid things.
So here's the funny thing. I did this Chat GPT thing.
Oh, God. I can't wait.
This is what's scary about AI. Sure, here's a ridiculous sports take in the exaggerated style of Jared Stillman. Dramatic, confident, and unapologetically contrarian.
Yes.
Quote, I don't care what the stats say. Tom Brady is overrated. That's right. If Adam Vinatieri doesn't make 2 clutch kicks, Brady is just slightly more polished Kirk Cousins. And don't even get me started on the tuck rule. If that call goes the other way, he's Drew Bledsoe's backup selling insurance in Michigan. The GOAT, please. He's the GLOAT. Greatest luck of all time.
Oh, man. Well,
the ironic part is Jared loves Tom Brady.
It should be noted that Jared said last week, and I'm not making this up, that if Tom Brady were to flatulate into a fragrance, he would buy it. That's how much he loves Tom Brady.
Yes.
I'm not making that up. So go back and listen to it. I saw that tweet from Jared. I saw it the next day, and I texted him and said, Jared, I'm sure your girlfriend, who's I assume this is the first time they've been away from their infant son. I said, I'm sure your girlfriend, who is on a tropical oasis right now, loves the fact that you are crap posting about Xavier Restrepo from a tropical location. Put the phone down. And guess what? He did not, because he's kept tweeting. Gary is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Gary, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
All right. I think we all know Jared don't know diddly.
That's one way of putting it.
And I'm going to put this a different way. I'm a Steeler fan, and I remember we had the fastest guy in the world, Dwight Stone, and Cordell Stewart would drop back, and he'd be 30 yards open. He'd throw a 70-yard bomb right into his pocket in his hands, and it'd go right through his hands, and we called him Stone Hands. So you could have the fastest, doesn't make him the best, and you could have the slowest. Edelman wasn't fast. A lot of these guys, it's how they play the game. You play the game with speed, or you don't. And that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you for the call, Gary. I mean, the perfect example of that is John Ross. John Ross ran a 4.22 coming out of Washington and did nothing of note in the NFL. Played 6 years, caught 63 passes over 6 years with 11 touchdowns. So just because you are the fastest man alive does not mean that you are going to be guaranteed to be, I should say, a top flight wide receiver. But I just, Jared has had it in for Xavier Restrepo since Jordan Schultz, who, when he's not trying to fight Ian Rappaport at the Starbucks, tweeted that Cam behind the scenes pushed the Titans to bring in Restrepo. And I'm sure many other teams did the same thing, but all of those other teams did not have Cam Ward. So who knows if Restrepo is going to make the team? He could end up being one of those undrafted free agent all-stars. And what I mean by that is that player who balls out in the preseason or in training camp, and you are certain he is going to be something special, and then you never hear from him again.
Yeah.
That could be Restrepo.
Could be.
But why not allow Titans fans to get excited about the idea of them bringing in a wide receiver who has a track record with this quarterback, had a great season playing with this quarterback. I am not sending Xavier Restrepo's Titans practice uniform to Canton, Ohio, but I'm going to be open-minded that he could be helpful for this team.
Yeah, and it's okay to be open-minded. Here's the other thing. All these other slappies that, we're talking about, and no offense to them, but, the guys that we all fall in love with in training camp and then they go into the abyss and we never hear from them again. How many of them were All-Americans? I mean, how many of them broke every receiving record at the University of Miami? And I don't know if you've looked at some of the receivers that have come out of the University of Miami, Michael Irvin, but they're pretty damn good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty good list to be on. I'm not saying that he's a lock and that's what's going to happen and all of that, but I'm saying the odds are in his favor to certainly do something, especially with a quarterback that he is familiar with. So again, I like Jared. Jared does a good job, obviously. I'm a big fan. But this, to me, is one of those, I'm just going to stir the pot because I know it's going to piss Titans fans off. Like, and it's dumb. And the fact that we're sitting here talking about it is playing into his hands. But it's just like, let's just see what happens. And I think a few texters, Gary said it, it's just like one of these guys has to hit. They don't have to be Jerry Rice, but they just have to be productive. And if Restrepo is one of them, who cares? Who cares about his 40? Who cares if he was drafted or undrafted? They obviously saw something in him that they liked. Yes, Brian Callahan admitted that, they saw more on him because they were watching the tape of Cam Ward and he was on virtually every play. And so that helped them out in that evaluation process. Turns out he didn't get drafted. He was there. Great. Let's bring him in. Let's see what happens.
Let me just show you the type of reaction that Jared Stillman generates. And to your point, Chase, this is why Jared Stillman is so good at his job.
Sure.
That's
what he does, man.
One reply. This is a back and forth with a Titans fan who replied to that tweet about Xavier Restrepo. I'm going to have to clean it up a little bit because there is some foul language. I cannot wait for the day one of the players slaps the F out of you. To which Jared replied, "Do you honestly think that's going to happen?" The person replied, "I pray to God every day that it does, every single day." Jared replies, "Maybe you should pray for the Titans to field a good football team instead." To which this person replied, "No, I would quite literally rather see Jeffrey Simmons slap the F out of you than see a Titans Super Bowl."
Oh, and then Jared went back and forth with him. Yeah, that was awesome.
Oh, man.
He's like, "Do you really think that would actually happen?" And I mean, look, Jeffrey Simmons almost slapped the F out of Buck Rising. Like, I mean, I don't think he was that close, but he got it in his face while he was on the air. But no, it's not going to happen. But
no, it's hilarious. And David James has something that he wants to share with us too.
Lord, the rod up that man's butt must have a rod up its butt.
That's exactly what I'm getting with. That's exactly what I'm getting at with Jared. So I know that if Restrepo, through training camp, preseason games, God help us all, if Xavier Restrepo drops a pass during the preseason. It's going to be
Jared will flaunt that.
It's going to be a 4-hour program. I told you. I told you.
I guaranteed it.
Back me up, Reed. Back me up.
Ian, where's the guarantee list? Yeah, I mean, it'll do that. Anytime I hear him do a guarantee and he has that stupid, Jared's guarantee thing, I'm just like, oh, get out of here.
One texter says, "Can you imagine Jared in an elevator with Jeffrey Simmons?"
Oh, God.
Don't they have a professional slap league? Isn't that a thing?
Yes, they do.
Can you imagine the amount of money we could make for charity if we had Jeffrey Simmons versus Jared Stillman and a slap fight?
Here's the thing. I would support that, but I'm kind of afraid that unintentionally Jeff might actually hurt Jared.
You play to win the game.
like, I don't know if Jeff would know his full strength.
Unintentionally,
you would get a good slow motion replay of Jared's chin just rippling from the force of the slap,
like Pat McAfee's chest after the match against Gunther on Saturday.
Yeah,
that's what Jared's face would look like. Just a giant Jeffrey Simmons sized paw on the side of his face.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Xavier Restrepo and how much you would pay to watch Jeffrey Simmons take on Jared Stillman in a professional slap match. 615-737-1025. Chase McCabe, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Chase McCabe, Adam Vingan here with you. Chase and Big Joe coming up next. Brett Kern in studio with Chase McCabe for the first half of the show. Big Joe will join in the second half. Tim Corbin will join Chase and Big Joe at 2 o'clock. All right. So before the break, I emphasize the word jokingly, said, how much would you pay to see Jeffrey Simmons take on Jared Stillman in a professional slap match? One texter says, I paid $900 to watch Morgan Wallen in the nosebleeds in Louisville. I think I'm willing to go that far to see Big Jeff rearrange Jared's face. One texter says, I could hear Jared talking about the slap contest. He would say, I like Simmons. He may not like me, but I just don't think he would be a good slapper because he doesn't get sacks. How could you be a good slapper if you don't get sacks? And I just one texter said, well, we know Jared will never be homeless. He's living rent-free in y'all's heads. We're just having fun. We love Jared. We love Jared. He's our friend. He's our coworker. We're having a great time at his expense.
Listen, I mean, to go inside baseball for a second, because I hear from you a lot, whether it be Twitter or email or something like that. And I'm well aware there's some of you that don't like Jared, and that's fine. He's not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, there are days where I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? But there's a reason that he's around, because guess what? He's still listening. So that's what it is.
That is true.
Whether you love him or you don't like, or whether you like him or you don't like him, learn to love him.
Yes.
Because he's pretty good at what he does.
So talking about Xavier Restrepo and wanting him to succeed, because a lot of Titans fans do want Xavier Restrepo to succeed. One texter says, I don't understand the hate. Ask New York Giants fans how they liked undrafted wide receiver Victor Cruz. It's not unheard of to have undrafted players succeed in the league. Another texter says, agree with you guys totally. Who cares if Cam pushed on bringing him in? Not like we drafted him. And that's my point. And we've made this point with the Predators, with Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. The only thing that the Predators spent to get those players is money. This season stunk, but the Predators didn't trade first-round picks or highly touted prospects to bring those guys in. All they did was spend money and take up cap space. And that's the same thing with Xavier Restrepo. Now, if it was reported that the Titans had a 7th-round grade on Xavier Restrepo, but Cam Ward busted into the war room and said, Mike Borgonzi, you will draft Xavier Restrepo with one of those 4th-round picks, then we might have an issue. But that's not what happened. I don't think it hurts to bring in someone. I don't know how much undrafted free agents make. I can't imagine it's very much.
No.
It doesn't hurt to bring him in. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not going to ruin the Titans' future if they bring in Xavier Restrepo, which they did, and it doesn't work. I think it's like a lottery ticket, right? It could pay out. It could be nothing. And I think it's totally fine. I'm curious just how it goes, because clearly they got along with each other. Actually, David, do we have the clip of Cam Ward? He's going to pull up the clip of Cam Ward discussing Xavier Restrepo. We'll get that in a minute. But I personally, I know it's Jared being Jared, but I thought even Jared, that was a step too far, Jared. I feel like you out-Jareded yourself with that particular
Well, I
tweet.
just can't wait for, if he, let's just say he makes the team out of training camp, that he's on the 53-man roster when they kick off week 1, to hear either the back pedal or sidestep that Jared's going to have. Because it's going to be there.
We tried to box him in at the end of our show last week because he took me to a Predators game with his season tickets a couple of years ago, and the Predators were playing the Avalanche, and he called Mikko Rantanen the Edgerrin James of the NFL, meaning that Rantanen's success was a byproduct, almost solely a byproduct of playing with Nathan McKinnon. And then to see what he's been doing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we tried to box Jared in. And as hard as we tried, he always tried to find that little bit of daylight. I even read him a list of the players in NHL history who have played a minimum of 50 playoff games, who have averaged more points per game in the playoffs than Mikko Rantanen. It's Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, and Nathan McKinnon. And all he could muster was a meh. So it's hard to box in Jared. But here was Cam Ward on Xavier Restrepo at rookie minicamp.
during the draft process and afterwards as well? Did you hope or were you trying to nudge people to bring him aboard?
I did push for him. Every team that I visited with, I pushed for him. He's one of the best route runners in college football last year. He's first team all conference. He's All American. He never lost in man coverage. He's back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver. So why wouldn't you put?
So that was Cam Ward on Xavier Restrepo.
I love that, by the way. I have zero problem at all with that, by the way, because that shows you something very, very special about Cam Ward. He's a loyal teammate. Now, Restrepo's got to do his part and live up to the hype, so to speak. But I love that you got a young quarterback like that going, yeah, I push for him. That's my guy. I mean, there's a reason. And then he laid out the stats to back it all up. Now, stats don't tell the whole story, but at the same time, I love hearing Cam Ward stick up for his guy like that.
Yeah, and we know that the history of Titans wide receiver, it's a mixed bag, to say the least.
Well, the best one works with you every day.
He absolutely does. I have the honor and privilege of working every day with Derek Mason, who, by the way, will be with Jake Lyman today and tomorrow from 3 to 6. So Chase and Big Joe from 12 to 3, Jake and Derek from 3 to 6 today and tomorrow. But Chase, you have a question of the day that you're going to present to the listeners of Chase and Big Joe. But I want to give you the opportunity to share with our listeners. I mean, they're all the same listeners. But at the end of DVD, I thought it was a really interesting question for your question of the day.
Well, Brett Kern just walked in, so he's going to be doing the first hour with me. I'm not going to tell you who currently holds these records because I want Brett to guess them. But question of the day will be, which franchise rookie quarterback record does Cam Ward have the best chance to break? I saw this on Twitter over the weekend, and Ricky sent it to me, and I was like, man, this would be a good topic for Monday. So there's 5. Is it 3,338 passing yards for the whole season, 19 passing touchdowns for the season, 371 passing yards in a game, 4 passing touchdowns in a game, or 62.2 completion percentage for the season?
When you shared that question with me earlier, my first thought was the 19 total touchdowns. Could I see Cam Ward having a Will Levis / Marcus Mariota type game? Maybe not in his debut. I mean, depending on who they play, which we will find out later this week in week 1. I wouldn't put it past him to have that type of game, but I do think that over the course of the season, of those numbers, I feel like 19 passing touchdowns is attainable for Cam Ward.
I like that one. I also like the completion percentage. I think 62.2 is achievable as much as they're going to throw the ball. I mean, I think they're going to throw the ball, give him every opportunity. We talk about these young receivers. I mean, the best way for the quarterback and the receivers to get better is by actually doing it. So I know they have a good run game with Pollard, and I think they're going to continue to rely on him. And I think Pollard's probably going to be even better this year with a better offensive line. But I think they're going to try and let Cam wing it, a few times. So I could see the touchdowns or completion percentage.
You said the completion percentage record is what?
62.2%.
Okay, to put that into context, Will Levis, for all his faults, had 63.1% last year.
Right.
So if Will Levis can complete more of a percentage of his passes than that number, considering what we saw
full year,
right? That one might be obtainable as well. We already do have a few responses. One texter says, even with the revamped offensive line, I think Ward is more likely to break the rookie record for most times sacked in a single season.
Ooh, I wonder what that one is.
That's worth looking up. Ricky says yards is in the bag in terms of total yards. Dustin in Hopkinsville says all those stats are dependent on these rookie receivers and Lockett. He says 4 passing touchdowns in a game or 62% completion percentage. To me, my gut tells me 19 touchdowns. I think that over the course of the season, if, and that's a big if, Cam Ward starts every game, I think he could do it. But we thought that Will Levis might start every game last season, and that didn't happen either.
I think Warren Moon has it for the franchise.
For most sacks taken?
By a rookie, 47.
Ooh.
The NFL record is David Carr in
Yes, it was like
2002,
70.
76.
Yeah, that was bad.
And the second on that list last year, Caleb Williams, 68.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Bryce Young, 62, is third in 2023. So there you go. But yeah, I don't know. I think this O line's going to be better than that. I mean, 47,
I would hope so.
47. For the love of God, I hope not.
One texter says, David on our text line says, wasn't NWI undrafted? How many touchdowns did he have last year? No complaints here about giving this kid, meaning Restrepo,
Yeah,
a shot.
NWI was undrafted.
And look, Nick Westbrook-Akine had an excellent season catching the ball once the Titans stopped trying to make Treylon Burks happen and put Nick Westbrook-Akine in the lineup because he barely played at the beginning of the season. I have a hard time imagining that Nick Westbrook-Akine is going to be able to sustain that production.
No. But good on him.
Right. He had 9 touchdowns last season. He had 10 career touchdowns entering the season. And I'm curious about Nick Westbrook-Akine in Miami. They've got Jalen Waddle. They've got Tyreek Hill. I think he's a perfect number 3, number 4 receiver for that group. He won't be relied on as much there. But to the texter's point, there are plenty of success stories around undrafted free agents. So I'm all for Xavier Restrepo giving it a go. I would just caution you not to get too excited about the video clips you see on Twitter.
During
5 minicamp.
Okay, if Xavier Restrepo turned out to play 5 seasons as an undrafted guy for this team, and most of those seasons he had to fight in training camp to make the team, if he ended up with 126 catches, 1,773 yards, and 19 touchdowns, undrafted guy, wouldn't you take that?
I would. Over how many years?
5 years.
Yeah.
As an undrafted guy. Now, granted, 2020.
Whose numbers were those?
That's NWI.
Really?
In 5 years.
Oh, wow.
He had 497 last year. But, I mean, 2020, he played 14 games, started one of them. He only had 3 catches for 33 yards. After that, 476 yards, 397, 370, 497. And obviously broke out with the touchdowns last year and became a red zone threat. But heck yeah, I'd take that.
One texter says, watch Cam Ward take Moon's number and then break Moon's sack record. I mean, I suppose that would be appropriate.
It could happen.
I assume that would be appropriate. Okay, quickly, because it's the two of us, Chase. Andrew from Dover, we will oblige. He wants to know what our thoughts were from Backlash on Saturday.
I thought it was okay. I mean, it was it was not a premier premium live event as they call them now, but I thought the championship match gave you nostalgia. I thought it was everything that it was going to be. I knew it wasn't going to be a clean finish. I think it went on maybe a little too long, but I liked the spot where Randy RKO'd half the people out there. There were a couple of callbacks that they did, which was cool, that some Easter eggs in the match to previous matches that they had, but I wasn't surprised by the outcome. I thought McAfee held his own, which was kind of fun to watch. The U.S. title match was probably my favorite match of the night, and it opened the show. It was good. The IC match was okay. Becky and Lyra was okay. But so overall, I thought it was an okay event.
Yeah, it was fine. It was a typical post-WrestleMania type of premium live event / pay-per-view. But if all of John Cena's title matches are going to be like that, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to watch
I hope not. But I will say, Cena, I thought looked, and maybe it's because they're closer in age, he looked better against Orton than he did against Rhodes. And he looked pretty good against Rhodes.
Let's just say the pace was
glacial. Yes.
Let's call it a glacial pace.
Yes, it was.
For that main event. But that'll do it for us today. Chase and Big Joe, featuring Brett Kern, is coming up next from 12 to 3. Jake Lyman and Derek
we
Mason.
punted Big Joe for the first hour.
Did you mean to do that?
I like that. I like that one.
With Brett Kern.
Brett's leaving.
Did you mean to do that? Jake Lyman and Derek Mason will take you home today from 3 to 6. Willie Donick and I will be back again at 9 tomorrow for DVD. Chase and Big Joe coming up next on behalf of Derek Mason. Be loved. Love on your people. Have a wonderful Monday. Peace.